Look at this drip. Look at this drip! Hello humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. Let me ask you, is Nintendo a better company today than it was back when the Wii U was launched? Compare both launches, right? And just ask yourself, is Nintendo a better company today with the launch of the Switch 2 than it was with the Wii U? That's what I want to talk to you about. You know, the company has changed so much, especially under this recent leadership, as we talked before. But, you know, sometimes I sit back and reflect. Right? I'm sitting there in my, famously my wife is always asking me, what are you thinking about? And this is what I was thinking about. You're going to see the Substack article. I'm going to put it down below. I wrote it just before I started this, but the advantage of the Substack, guys, it has more detail, right? When I'm talking, I'm just off the cuff, general thoughts, what have you. But if you want to dig into the woods, just go down there. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And if you like to read, there you go. If you don't like to read, use the reader. What can I tell you? I'm thinking of putting those in a podcast sort of form, maybe. I don't know. Regardless, guys, does it feel better? And I would say no. Is it a better company? I would say no. I would say that Nintendo in the Wii U era was a more customer-friendly company than it is today.
Well, guys, I just don't expect you to take my word for it. Of course, let's look at the numbers, and just the entry point. Let's say the total cost of ownership going in, right? Let's say you get a console, 3 games, and a controller. Well, back in the Wii U DS era, you could average about $557. Today, in the Switch 2 era, $767. That's right. Hardware entry points are something that people don't often talk about, but they do make a huge difference. If you're talking about the Nintendo 3DS, launched back in 2011, $249.99, and then after weak sales, the Nintendo dropped the price to $169. Something that you would wish Xbox would do, right? A few months later, this adjustment, was responsive to consumers. A few years later, the company introduced the 2DS at $129.95, giving gamers even a cheaper option. Adjusted for inflation, the 3DS right now would run about $325, $350. In dollars, the $129 for the DS would be $175, $180. Of course, it's a lower powered console, but it was more consumer friendly. It gave you an option if you don't want to buy the Wii U. You don't have such a thing today with the Switch 2. With the Switch 2, it's the only thing that you can purchase, and the launch price of $449.99, that is higher than any other handheld or home console at launch that Nintendo has ever launched. For families who bought multiple 2DS's units for their children, to switch to a Switch 2, for example, makes it far harder. So there's just more value. Back in the Wii U days, you had more options.
Nintendo today, to me, and to many of you out there, feels like a completely profit-driven company. Everything they're putting out, right, is the maximum amount of dollars. And I think they got this from the Switch era, really, because if you look at the Switch prices throughout the era, and I can tell you, because I'm always looking at games to buy, right? If there's a game that maybe I don't feel like playing right now, but I like it, I'll wait for the prices to come down. And some don't come down that much. For example, I did that with Astral Chain. Astral Chain took forever to come down. I had to use a coupon and this and that and the other. And then I bought it when it was a reasonable price. But it stayed at retail price forever. And then on top of that, if you wanted it used, it was only $5 less. I mean, it's crazy. It was crazy, right? 2 years after, the prices are still high. And I think that's where they got the idea from, hey, we can charge whatever we want with these games. We're a completely different environment than the Xbox or the PlayStation. And that's how they outsold them. They just had products that people wanted more. And of course, there's always brand loyalty, right? But back then, even though they had all these issues with the Wii U, they had all these different offerings for the customer. Prices, would I say, were a lot better back then. You could get a lot more deals than you can now. But just their offering, people were confused by the Wii U. The marketing wasn't great, but people wouldn't say, I feel ripped off by the Wii U. I think that these games, X, Y, Z, and that's not the case. I mean, that's why they're so collectible now. But if you look at the recent releases for the Switch 2, the majority of the public says these are overpriced. Whether you're talking about, what is it, the Super Mario World now? Or anything else that they're putting out. Now they want top dollar for a re-release. It's nuts. It's nuts. And people are paying it, but it's not going to be a new audience. I think that this Christmas we're going to see where that limit is, right? Where you have, people buying the Switch 2, but it's going to be people that are Nintendo loyalists, right? That weren't able to afford it back then. Maybe they can afford it now for Christmas. Great, they're going to go into. But as far as tapping into a new market, I think that's where they're gonna reach that Wii to Wii U moment where people are going, wait a minute, why am I paying $80 for this game? Why am I paying $70 for this game? And that's really the sentiment, a large part sentiment of the community. Not here on YouTube because, the shills are gonna shill, right? That's what they do. Oh, this is the latest and greatest, yada yada yada. Okay, is it, paying $70 for a re-release? Is that the latest and greatest? Is that the best we could do? Everything that Nintendo is doing right now is profit-driven. Profit-driven.
I'll give you a perfect example on how Nintendo's not being consumer-friendly. Right? There is nothing, and absolutely, nothing that is stopping Nintendo from making a standalone console, which would be cheaper than the Switch 2, right? Because all you're doing is creating a console. You're not doing anything else but creating a console, which is great for the consumer, right? You could just make a digital download or even have carts, what have you. But by not having that screen, you're lowering the cost. If you had an option that was $100 cheaper, people will jump on it. You would expand the market, but they're not even considering that. Why? Because in the past, the cheaper option has always been their handhelds. Always. The first thing they did for the public was the Game Boy, right? You had the Game Boy. Hey, there you go. You can't afford the big one. The Game Boy kept you out. And those handhelds were the option for consumers who were looking for better prices in the market. But that's no longer the case because the top of the line item for them is the Switch 2. They want people to gravitate towards the Switch 2 as an upgrade. And you're going to say, well, the Switch is there. Yeah, but that's the same platform. I'm talking about just having a console for people who don't want to play handheld, right? Because you can dock it. Okay, now you have a console. Why not just have the console and make it cheaper for consumers? That would be a great idea. You would have the graphics that you want, and you would have a lower price. But that would mean opening another manufacturing line, right? And that is not as profitable as just having one console, a hybrid, that you can, sell as many digital downloads to, right? That's what I'm talking about. These things aren't even proposed anymore. It's being streamlined to get the most amount of money out of the customer when before, they were profitable, but they were always experimenting. And that, with this new administration, with these people that came over from EA, that's completely out the door.
I don't think if you're a collector, I don't think if you're a real video game fan and you've been a Nintendo fan since they came out, you're happy about the direction the company's going now. You're starting to see a lot more, DLC day one. What is that about? That was the whole point of Nintendo. No DLC, right? And now we're getting it, and you're going to get even more. You're going to get even more. So what does this bode for the future? I think there's going to be a market reduction for Nintendo. I think there's, other players in the market, whether it's a Steam Deck, Xbox not so much because they don't have original, IPs. I think that PlayStation with their handheld they could put a big dent into Nintendo if they really wanted to, right? If PlayStation comes out there, I mean, it doesn't even have to be that complicated. If PlayStation makes a handheld that's $100 cheaper, right, and you have access just even to the PlayStation True Library remakes, they would put a huge dent on Nintendo, right? Remember that famous, what was it, E3? That's what could happen to Nintendo themselves, because I think they're getting too big for their bridges. I think that being focused on profit so much is not a good thing for the company. Yes, the stock might go, sky high, what have you, but at the end, if you lose all your customer base, or your customer base doesn't grow as much in the future, and you're not able to get a brand new generation of players, you're in trouble. Because right now, kids are playing mobile. None of my grandkids, and I have 6 of them, none of them are playing Nintendo products. Not a single one. They're playing Roblox, right? They're playing Minecraft. They're playing Fortnite. Those are the 3 things that they're playing. And nobody's asking me for Mario. Nobody's asking me, I want to have a Switch 2. Right? I bought them for presents for my older kid, But the younger kids, no, not really. They could do without it. If I tell them you're never going to play a Nintendo game, they couldn't care. So if they're going to be greedy right now, they're going to sacrifice their future. Those are my thoughts, guys. I love Nintendo. I've loved Nintendo over the years. But I really don't like the direction that they're going in. I don't think they're a better company today than they were back then. You tell me how you feel. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.
New videos every Monday and Sunday. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Gen X Gamer. Remember to like and subscribe, click that notification bell, and remember, never ever be afraid to be happy. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.